Marcus Whitman, CEO of a five-star restaurant chain, embarked on a daring challenge to disguise himself as a black guest to uncover the dark truths within his own system. What he experienced would change everything. Can Marcus confront and rectify the injustices he's just discovered? What are your thoughts on Marcus's journey? Do you believe a person can truly change an entire system from the inside? Don't miss the continuation of this story to see how Marcus faces the biggest challenge of his life and whether he can genuinely transform hearts and the fate of Veritas restaurant. An evening at the upscale restaurant. The crystal lights twinkled, reflecting off gleaming crystal glasses and polished silverware. The rich aroma of prime beef Wellington mingled with the faint scent of truffles, creating a warm yet luxurious ambience. Elegantly dressed guests, from finely tailored suits to glamorous evening gowns, conversed to the soothing sound of jazz, transforming the restaurant into a realm where luxury met relaxation. Marcus Whitman, the founder and CEO of this renowned restaurant chain, sat at a table near the large window. Dressed in a refined midnight blue suit, he gazed out at the nighttime street, where headlights glistened on rain-slick pavement. In the dim light, his eyes held a contemplative glint, as if listening to not just the sounds but the unspoken stories within the restaurant. Marcus had always taken pride in his achievements. From humble beginnings, he had built a culinary empire celebrated across the city, but behind this perfect facade, troubling rumors had emerged. Some longtime patrons, particularly black guests, had started whispering about unpleasant experiences they faced. Marcus first heard this from an old friend, Jerome, a successful black entrepreneur who recounted feeling unwelcome at one of Marcus's restaurants. Initially, Marcus struggled to believe such things could happen in his establishment. He thought of the values he had ingrained in his company culture: fairness, professionalism, and respect for all patrons regardless of race or background. But when informal reports began surfacing from the customer service department and supervisors, he could no longer ignore them. The data was clear: complaints from black patrons about service were increasing. Marcus felt a pang of distress, like a knife twisting in his heart. As he pondered, Marcus observed a well-dressed black couple entering the restaurant. Their eyes, though composed, revealed caution. A young waiter named Derek, outwardly confident but with a detached demeanor, approached their table. Marcus noticed Derek's subtle but unmistakable difference in treatment: no welcoming smile and a noticeably flatter tone compared to how he greeted other guests. Marcus frowned as Derek walked away, leaving the couple visibly uneasy. Another server, Lucy, noticed and hurried over to assist, but the moment had already soured. Marcus watched the couple's worried expressions, and a growing sense of doubt took root in his mind. That night, after the guests had left, Marcus sat alone in his office on the second floor. The hum of the coffee machine seemed to blend with the rhythm of his heartbeat. An internal report arrived, documenting complaints from black patrons about unfriendly service. For the first time, Marcus clearly saw the harsh reality: discrimination wasn't just baseless rumors, but a ghost haunting the very house he had built. Marcus closed his eyes, recalling the times he was a boy growing up in a poor neighborhood, judged by his skin color before he even spoke. He felt a surge of anger and determination flare up inside him. Something had to be done, and it had to be done now. He knew he couldn't let this situation continue without action. Marcus woke the next morning with unwavering resolve. The sky was still dim, with pale dawn light filtering through the wide windows of his modern apartment. He sat by a steaming cup of coffee, eyes fixed on a hastily written note from the night before to discover the truth from within. His mind raced with a daring plan no CEO had ever considered. He knew his presence as a leader would influence his employees' behavior. To understand the root of the problem, he needed to experience the reality firsthand, undercover. Seeking help, Marcus called an old friend, Claire, a makeup artist who had worked in film and theater. Claire was someone he trusted completely, an artist with the talent to transform appearances so convincingly that no one would recognize him. "Marcus, this is quite unusual," Claire said over the phone, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern. "But I understand your reasons. Come by this afternoon and we'll make this idea a reality." The transformation. That afternoon, Marcus stepped into Claire's small makeup studio. It was a creative space filled with masks, wigs, and makeup supplies. Claire approached him with a soft smile, shook his hand, and led him to a large mirror. "We'll start with your skin tone," Claire said, pulling out a specially formulated dark foundation. Marcus sat still as she carefully applied the makeup, creating a natural new complexion. Next, she added false wrinkles around his eyes and mouth, making him look older and more experienced. The transformation took hours. Claire added a beard, adjusted his hair, and reshaped his eyebrows. Finally, he put on simple clothing that could be seen on any street corner. When it was all done, Marcus looked in the mirror and saw a completely different person, a middle-aged black man, someone who looked nothing like a powerful CEO but an ordinary citizen. Marcus was startled by the flawless transformation. He reached out to touch the mirror, seeing a stranger staring back at him. The unfamiliarity and a hint of fear washed over him, but there was also a new fire in his eyes and unyielding determination. He told himself this is the only way to uncover the truth. Claire placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder and smiled. "You're ready now. But be careful, Marcus. You're about to face some harsh realities." Back at home, Marcus meticulously prepared for the upcoming experiment. He rummaged through his drawer and found an old wallet he used back in college. Inside, he put a few small bills and an ID card that Claire had altered to match his new appearance. He knew that every detail had to be perfect, with no room for error. Marcus stood at the entrance of Veritas with a heavy heart. He gripped the cold metal door handle, the chill seeping into his palm like a silent warning. The doorbell chimed as he stepped inside. The restaurant's morning atmosphere was serene, yet beneath that calm facade, Marcus sensed an uneasy, oppressive undercurrent. Jason, the host, glanced at him and asked curtly, "What do you need?" Marcus replied, trying to mask his discomfort. "A table for one." By the window, if possible. Jason shrugged, glanced around the room, and pointed to a table near the kitchen. "Sit over there," he said indifferently. Marcus pressed his lips together, realizing that this table was far from the prime spots other guests were being seated at. "Thank you," he said softly, though a storm brewed inside him. Derek, the confident young waiter, approached Marcus's table with impatience clear in his eyes. "What do you want to order?" Derek asked, offering no smile or warmth. Marcus looked up, meeting Derek's detached gaze. "I'll have the steak and a glass of water," he replied. Derek nodded emotionlessly and walked away without writing anything down. Marcus watched him go, a sense of sadness welling up. Marcus observed Derek move to the next table, where a white couple was seated. Instantly, Derek's demeanor transformed, his face lighting up with energy. "Good morning. Would you like to try our special today?" he asked with enthusiastic cheer. Marcus's heart grew heavy as he listened. He realized that the difference in treatment wasn't an innocent mistake but a deliberate choice. Lucy, another server, noticed Marcus and approached with a sheepish smile. "Sorry for the delay. Is there anything else you need?" she asked, her voice gentle but tinged with unease. Marcus shook his head, not wanting to draw attention, but he could sense that even Lucy, despite her good intentions, wasn't brave enough to challenge the status quo. When the meal arrived, Marcus noticed his steak had been placed carelessly, with sauce spilling over the edge of the plate, and the usual side of bread was missing. He looked up and caught Derek's cold stare. "Excuse me, could I have an extra napkin?" Marcus asked, his voice calm yet firm. Derek raised an eyebrow and let out an audible sigh before turning away without a word. A nearby customer, a neatly dressed white businessman, observed the scene and shook his head slightly, as if silently acknowledging the unfair treatment Marcus was enduring. When Marcus stood up to pay, he approached the cashier where Derek was stationed. "Can I settle the bill?" he asked. Derek cast a disinterested glance at him and slid the check across the counter without a word. Marcus remained composed, picked up the check, and asked, "Do you ever think that treating customers differently could affect the restaurant's reputation?" Derek blinked, his face flushing briefly before he turned away without responding. Marcus placed the money down and murmured, just loud enough for himself to hear, "One day the truth will find its way out." Marcus left the restaurant, each step heavy as though an invisible weight bore down on his shoulders. On the bustling street, the sunlight glinted off the Veritas sign, as if mocking him with the irony embedded in its name. His restaurant, named after truth, was instead riddled with falsehoods and injustices. He knew he couldn't ignore this any longer. His heart was filled with disappointment, but it also carried a fierce determination. The next morning, Marcus woke up with an unshakable resolve. He dressed in a classic black suit, carefully knotting a blue tie that symbolized his commitment to integrity. Today was no ordinary day. It was the day he would confront the reality and bring light into the darkness surrounding his restaurant chain. Before leaving his apartment, Marcus looked in the mirror and spoke to himself. Today, everything will change. When Marcus entered the restaurant as the CEO, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The same employees who had regarded him with disdain the day before now straightened up, plastered on bright smiles, and bowed in greeting. Jason, the host, stepped forward with a beaming grin and asked politely, "Good morning, Mr. Whitman. Will you be dining at your usual table today?" Marcus locked eyes with Jason and replied, "Thank you, but I won't be dining today. I want to see all the staff in the meeting room immediately." The restaurant's large meeting room was elegantly decorated, with a mahogany table and sleek black leather chairs. Marcus stood at the head of the table, his eyes scanning the faces of his employees Derek, Lucy, Jason, and the rest. The room fell into a heavy silence, and everyone could sense the gravity in Marcus's gaze. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I've called this meeting," Marcus began, his voice low and steady. "Yesterday I visited this place not as the CEO of this restaurant chain but as an ordinary guest." A few employees looked up, eyes wide with surprise. Derek swallowed hard, his face paling. Marcus's voice grew stronger as he continued. "I experienced firsthand what some of our guests have to endure: indifference, coldness, and blatant discrimination. I cannot believe that the values I worked so hard to establish have been so openly betrayed." Reactions from the staff. Lucy lowered her head, tears welling up in her eyes. She remembered the wariness in Marcus's eyes when he had asked for a napkin, and regret filled her heart for not having the courage to speak up. Jason shot a quick glance at Derek, who sat frozen, face pale and hands trembling. Marcus turned to Derek, his gaze unyielding. "Derek, do you have anything to say?" His voice wasn't loud, but his tone cut like a knife. Derek stared down at the table, his lips trembling. I didn't know you were here. If I had known, I would have acted differently," he mumbled. Marcus interrupted, "That's exactly the problem. Respect should not depend on who the person is. Every customer deserves to be treated with fairness and kindness." The tension in the room was palpable. Marcus took a deep breath and spoke more softly, but with no less gravity. "I know that many of you may not have realized that you've become part of this discrimination. But that doesn't lessen our responsibility. To make a change, we must confront the truth and do the right thing." Marcus emphasized that apologies were not enough. "Starting today, we will implement mandatory training sessions on empathy and fair treatment. I will personally oversee this initiative and work with experts to ensure we not only correct our mistakes but also create a genuinely equitable environment for everyone." The people in the room felt a heavy weight in their hearts, but there was also a glimmer of hope. For the first time, they realized this wasn't just empty talk but a promise from a leader ready to take real action. Marcus looked around, his eyes softening. "We can do this," he said, his voice full of determination. "But it will take all of us working together." As the meeting concluded, no one spoke, but the atmosphere had changed. Those who had been indifferent, those who had remained silent, now understood that change had begun, and they were part of it. Marcus lingered for a moment, looking out the window as sunlight illuminated the Veritas sign. He knew that the journey to truth was far from over, but at least today he had taken a resolute first step. After the tense meeting, Marcus realized that words alone wouldn't be enough to transform his employees' attitudes and mindsets. He devised a special program, a reverse experiment. Every employee, from managers to waitstaff, would be disguised and experience a day in the shoes of a black customer. Marcus wanted them to feel firsthand the discrimination he had witnessed. When Marcus announced the plan, a stunned silence filled the room. Derek leaned against the wall, his eyes thoughtful as he struggled to grasp the significance of the exercise. Lucy, who had long been troubled by her own silence, felt a mix of anxiety and hope. This was a chance to understand better and to make amends. Claire, the makeup artist, was brought in to help transform the employees. In the makeup room, the initial laughter from some staff gradually faded as they looked at themselves in the mirror. Jason barely recognized himself, with darker skin and the added shadows around his eyes that emphasized fatigue. Derek, after his transformation, stared at his reflection, wordless. A growing sense of unease and fear surfaced as he realized he was about to experience what many customers had endured. The employees were split into small groups and sent to various restaurants, shops, and public spaces where subtle discrimination still lingered. Derek and Lucy were taken to another upscale restaurant in the city. As they walked in, the disdainful glances and indifferent attitudes from the waitstaff quickly made them realize they were not welcome. When ordering, Derek tried to keep his voice steady, but he received curt and unfriendly replies from the waiter. Lucy observed everything with tear-filled eyes, a sense of humiliation creeping into each breath. A nearby customer glared at them, muttering something with visible disdain. Their meal arrived late, and when it did, it was placed harshly on the table, without so much as a smile or a polite word. After leaving the restaurant, Derek and Lucy walked in silence down the street. The feeling of being looked down upon, of being excluded, made Derek realize the pain he had unknowingly inflicted on others. "Lucy, is this what we've done to them?" Derek uttered, his voice trembling. Lucy said nothing, only nodded and wiped away her tears. This wasn't a lesson from a textbook, it was a reality they were forced to confront. When all the employees returned from the experiment, Marcus was waiting in the meeting room. He looked at their tired faces, the regret and newfound understanding visible in their eyes. No words were needed, the silence in the room spoke volumes. Derek stepped forward, facing Marcus, his expression full of shame. "Mr. Whitman, I didn't realize how much I was hurting others," Derek said, his voice hesitant but sincere. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded. "Recognizing your mistake is the first step, Derek. What matters now is taking action to make things right and never repeating it." Following the experiment, Marcus held a meeting for everyone to share their experiences. One by one, the employees recounted the feelings of discrimination, the humiliation, and even the anger. Lucy, her voice breaking, admitted, "I never thought that a simple look or attitude could make someone feel worthless. But I was wrong. I stayed silent, and that was my fault." Marcus looked at them with resolute eyes. "We are halfway there. Now, we need to turn this awareness into action. I want to see you not just as employees, but as advocates for fairness and respect." From that day forward, the employees' attitudes changed noticeably. They treated customers with genuine care and attentiveness. Any signs of discrimination were quickly recognized and corrected. Derek, once an arrogant waiter, became a leader in discussions about empathy and equality. Witnessing the shift in his staff's awareness, Marcus decided to implement a series of strong reforms to ensure that the lesson extended beyond a brief experience. He organized a large meeting involving all employees, from managers to servers, chefs, and back-of-house staff. "We have learned a painful lesson," Marcus began the meeting, his gaze sweeping over everyone present. "But we cannot let this lesson fade into oblivion. Starting today, we will launch a comprehensive reform plan to make Veritas a symbol of fairness and inclusivity." Marcus outlined the new measures he intended to implement. Regular training sessions on empathy and equal treatment would be conducted, featuring sociologists and speakers who had personally experienced discrimination. Additionally, he called for the creation of an independent oversight department to monitor and address complaints about staff behavior. Jason, the receptionist who had once been indifferent, spoke up for the first time in a meeting. "I think this is necessary, not just to improve our service but to change how we see and treat people." His sincerity was evident, and others nodded in agreement. Marcus didn't stop at internal reforms. He reached out to local organizations dedicated to education and advocating for minority rights, aiming to collaborate on long-term projects. Veritas became a key partner in community events, such as equality workshops and charity programs that provided opportunities for young people of color to enter the service industry. Lucy, who had previously remained silent, volunteered to participate in community events. She told her colleagues, "After everything we've been through, I feel a responsibility to do more. Not just at work, but in society as well." The initial training sessions were not just dry lectures, but lively discussions where employees shared their feelings and asked questions. One of the speakers was Jerome, Marcus's old friend, who recounted his experience of being mistreated at Marcus's flagship restaurant. "I knew that day was a mistake, but I never imagined it would become the catalyst for such a significant change," Jerome said, his eyes shining with pride. Derek, who had undergone the reverse experiment and felt the sting of discrimination, now led initiatives to mentor new employees. "We're not just working for a paycheck, we're working to make a difference," he said during one of the discussions. People looked at Derek with newfound respect, realizing that even someone who once had the worst attitude could change and become a role model. The changes extended beyond training sessions and new policies. They became evident in the day-to-day atmosphere. Marcus implemented small but meaningful changes to the workspace, such as adding artwork by Black artists and quotes about unity and respect among different races. As Marcus walked through the restaurant late one evening, he saw Derek helping a young new staff member with a smile and genuine dedication. Jason greeted a Black customer warmly, as if they were old friends. Lucy chatted with patrons about an upcoming charity event that the restaurant was involved in. Veritas had transformed, not just in service but in the spirit and hearts of those who worked there. These reforms gradually reshaped Veritas's reputation. The number of customers visiting the restaurant increased, but more importantly, they felt the sincerity in the service. Some customers shared that they came not just for the food, but for the welcoming and friendly atmosphere the restaurant offered. Marcus knew the journey was far from over, but seeing the profound changes in the familiar faces around him gave him a sense of fulfillment. This was no longer just a restaurant, it had become a symbol of a united community, where everyone could feel respected. The transformation at Veritas extended beyond the restaurant's walls. Stories of the reform in Marcus's journey toward fairness spread rapidly throughout the city's business community. Local newspapers and prestigious magazines, such as The Voice of the City, began covering the restaurant's impressive turnaround. Marcus was invited to participate in numerous panels and workshops to share his story and the importance of internal change. At a major conference attended by service industry leaders, Marcus stood on stage, the spotlight highlighting his calm yet resolute demeanor. Change doesn't just start with big decisions, it starts with the courage to face uncomfortable truths, he said, his eyes sweeping over the attentive audience. We've learned that fairness isn't something you teach from a book. It has to be lived, felt, and practiced through small, consistent actions every day. Derek, once the antagonist in this story, had become a symbol of transformation. He volunteered to speak at schools and businesses, sharing his experience and how it changed his perspective on life. I used to think work was just work, and friendliness was optional, Derek said during a talk at a community center. But once I walked in someone else's shoes, everything changed. I realized that every action, every word, can impact others in ways I never imagined. Lucy also took part in these initiatives, offering insights from her own experience. She spoke about the regret of not speaking up and the pride she felt seeing herself and her colleagues change for the better. Their stories not only inspired others but also pushed businesses to reconsider how they treated their employees and customers. Marcus and the Veritas team's efforts caught the attention of larger organizations. Some companies in the city began inviting Marcus's team to consult on building a fair and inclusive culture. Veritas partnered with nonprofit organizations to host community workshops and events, raising awareness about equality and social inclusion. At the opening ceremony of a charity program, Marcus and the Veritas team distributed gifts to families in need. Jason, who had once been an indifferent receptionist, now greeted everyone with genuine enthusiasm, proud to be part of the change. An elderly customer who had previously experienced unfair treatment approached Marcus and said, "Thank you, not just for a restaurant, but for bringing hope to our whole community." Veritas didn't stop there. Marcus and his team decided to open more small branches, not just as dining venues but as community hubs where conversations and workshops on equality and education could take place. They invited social activists, artists, and scholars to share their stories, creating safe spaces for discussions about topics that many places avoided. One of the standout programs was shared meals where guests from different cultural backgrounds were invited to exchange experiences and stories. During one such evening, Marcus sat beside Jerome, the friend who had once reminded him of the injustices he had overlooked. The two of them shared their hopes and future plans, laughing and feeling the warmth of genuine connection. Marcus stood in a corner of the restaurant, listening to the sound of laughter and conversation. He saw Derek leading a group of customers to their seats with care, and Lucy patiently guiding a new staff member with a smile. Veritas had become more than a restaurant, it was a hub of unity and understanding. Their story had spread far beyond their original vision, planting seeds of change throughout the city and beyond. Marcus closed his eyes and let out a sigh of relief, knowing that his journey and the team's work were far from over. There was still much to do, but every step carried hope. He smiled, confident that Veritas had truly become a symbol of fairness and compassion, not just within the service industry but in the hearts of the people. Thank you for following Hearth Story's story and our journey of change. If you believe that fairness and compassion can make a difference, support us by sharing this video and spreading the message to more people. Don't forget to follow us for updates on our upcoming initiatives and how you can get involved in building a more united community. Let's turn small actions into big change together.